That twice, like so. So we're just going to let this run through until I have a loop, and then I'm going to pass the needle back through that loop, guys. Pull it tight, and now we can cut it off. Now, here's the problem. You don't want to sew all the way along here. I did that the last time. You can, but it'll bunch up more. And I noticed that all I had to do to eliminate that was to make less stitches. And it's still going to bunch up a little, but it won't be that bad. So, here we go. We're going to make the next sew further up. But again, I want to see where the tension is that I'm looking for here. The goal is always to achieve correct tension. So throughout this whole process, I'm always looking at the tension that I'm inducing on the line and trying to make sure, darn it. Sorry about that, guys. It's awkward to film this and have the camera close enough that you can see it. I've actually got the camera in between me and what I'm sewing so that you guys can see it and not me. And it's a pain in the bum. So anyway, so we're going to run some lines through here. Now, these lines really are just there to allow the sail to travel along this new traveler line that we've installed. And our travel is going to be this way, from front to back. So we're going to try and show you guys that. Now, I'm actually going to move this back a little ways so you guys can see a little bit better here. We're going to move that over a little. And that way we both can see better. So we're almost done here, tying knots in the end of this once again. Now that that's complete, we're going to move up about the same. We don't want to do this too often, but you notice here, I don't want a huge pocket in the back. I don't want the big pocket to start until we get to the front of the sail. So I'm going to take up as much leeway room as I can. Now this is one good tip. You'll notice in the other two spots I started from the rear. This is why. Because I don't want that big hunk of frickin' crap sticking out. And I'm going to fix that. So there's one way to fix it is just to snip it. Snip it, man. Just snip it. Alright, so what I will say is while you're doing this, you're trying to achieve tension in the sail, not on the line. What I mean is, this line shouldn't be under any more tension than it was when you installed it. You want your tension to be taken up by how much material you put here as a wraparound. And it'll do that, as you can see. It tensions it really nicely. So there's that. But then there's the other part of this where this is all going to have to slide from here back all the way along. So if you put too many stitches, or if they're too tight to the line, it'll resist sliding. You want to remember that these are essentially going to be sliders, and they're going to have to slide up and down a wire. So the less tension we have on those stitches, not the wire, the stitches themselves have to be kind of loose. Now, you don't want them loose, but you don't want them tight. So it's just kind of one of those things. It's hard to show you, but the common sense will guide you in such situations. So now we're going to keep that line to the bottom here, and I'm going to try and determine exactly how much sail area I want, how much space I want, and now so we don't get a messy seam that shows with a big knot at the end of it, I'm going to pull that through, and that way it hides my knot around the backside, guys, which isn't so bad. And we're just going to keep that running through until I have enough of it around that line. Now really, because this thread is so thick, guys, I really don't need much of it. In fact, the couple of wraps that I just put on is more than enough. I'm using 4 wraps here, so 2 and then 2 to lock it off. And that's a good amount. You'll find that that's more than enough. Now, the other thing about that is you could use just cheap thread. Dollar store thread is what I used the first time I did it. But I'll get some of that out here, and I'll show you the difference in thickness and why you would not want this as your preference. Now, if you look carefully here, this is the stuff I'm using versus the stuff I used the first time. And you can see just here the thickness of one versus the other. It's a big difference. So I recommend you use the thicker stuff, but I mean, hey, whatever you can get your hands on that works will do the job. The only real difference is if you're using thinner string, instead of putting 2 wraps, put 4. I'm not doubling my thread over, as you can see here. I haven't doubled the thread over. When I use dollar store thread, I do. So in the end, it doesn't make too much of a difference. And now again, I'm just pulling over the amount of material I want to take away from this sail, guys. That's really all I'm doing here. And I did want to take some away. In fact, when I made it, I pointed out that I left a little extra room there, and that's why I did it. So there's 1 wrap. Here's our second. And now we're going to do 2 to tie it off, just like I showed you. So there's 1. And again, I'm not trying to make these stitches real tight because I actually just want them tight enough to do the job. And that's about it. So I'm going to make 1 more knot. And then I'm going to show you guys. It's kind of going to be like the big reveal where I show you guys how this works. In addition, now that we have all of this done, I have to finish tightening the sail. So you might think that's a bit of a problem, but it's really not. All I actually have to do is lock in my boom, which it hasn't been. And now you see we have a problem with our back line. So what you want to do is put your boom in the right position. And once we have this sewn off, we have the final tension of our sail. And once we have the final tension figured, we can start with the next step. So really all I want to do here is just put over enough to make my next line. And we're going to put another slide line here. And then once that's done, you really could do this with just 1 go around, but it'll last longer if you do it with 2 like I am, or 3 or 4. That is a fact. So the other thing I've noticed is if you're using a long thread when you're sewing, it almost always screws the thing up at some point, like that. It really screwed that up on me, but it could have been worse. I caught it early, so I was able to fix it. So you'll notice we've still got a little bit hanging here, and we are going to fix that real quick, and I'll show you how. And how I'm going to fix it is probably going to surprise you. So before I take this next step, we're going to do something hectic here. We're going to take our X-Acto knife, and where before I had sewn these together here, I'm now trimming that apart, because you could do it either way, and I wanted to show you guys how to go about it. And that's all well and good, but I also wanted to show how to do it both types of setup. So, you know, I mean, you really need to be paying attention if you're going to do both types of setups at the same time. And I didn't really know which one at first I was going to do anyway. So all I want to do here is get this loose from here, okay? Now, you know, I've got a wire in here, right? So I got to cut around without cutting my wire, like that, or I cut my wire. So now I've cut my wire. Oh, no. Oh, this is the horrible part, where all that work was for nothing, guys. You might think, but it's really not. I'm just going to hold this and show you. So we've got an extra flap here. I'm just going to show you real quick here. So we've got a flap here. I'm going to have this sewn onto another rope, and then it just slides down. And now we have that sail up, and it can slide back out. That is how our sails are going to operate. And the other side, it's not really necessary that I do it to the other side, and the reason is it's a storm sail, which means when this one on the outside is out, this sail can stay out, and it just makes for more speed. In weather where you need the storm sail, you put the main foresail out and leave the storm sail up. But I do want to have both of these on a traveler. It's how I did it the first time, and I liked it. Also, I need to secure these 2 ends as well here. And I actually have a metal pin that I'm going to insert here. and then lock everything in, and you'll see it's going to bow it more. And at that point, I'm going to need to retension the main anyway. So what I actually recommend is that you do this in stages. The first stage is just to set the sails up and see what they look like and figure out your sizes and all that stuff. Then you want to figure out roughly your tension. Then you want to figure out where your lines are going to run. And because I've done this with enough room, I've made these loose. I can just run my line through, and it doesn't matter that this line has broken. I can just run it through and repair it real quick. So I'm just going to run over this real quick now. Because I already had this all sewn on here, I actually had too much material sewn up here, and I had to cut through it to get out of there, which is no big deal. Now all that I'm going to do is sew this up like a nice tight flap. And my wire is going to have to run through here first. Then I'm going to connect it the way it was before. And then it's on a slider. And the best part of that is because the back edge stays consistent, I've now cut this front edge just to show you. And take a look. The mast is still in line and straight and bowed where it's supposed to be. And the reason that it is because this back line stayed tight. Now, we are not going to detach that back line, if you remember me saying. That's one of the reasons it does need to be this way, is because if this wire ever broke, you'd still have the back line tight, and the sail won't be all over the place. It'll manage just fine. Now, the other part of this is I could have this on a traveler, okay? And you could spin this sail out any way you want, you might think, but really no. And what you'd want to do is, if you're going to use a traveler on this sail, other than going forwards and backwards to close the sail, I also am going to install another traveler that goes from here to here and allows the two sails to swing together and slide all the way across as one. That way we have truly two foresails, and both of them are completely controllable. Now that'll take more servos, but I don't care. I've showed you guys the single servo setup. Now I'm going to show you the more complicated setup. It involves a lot, so stay tuned, like, subscribe, and I will show you how to make an RC sailboat that doesn't suck. Honest.